Thank you. It's so nice to see you. Nice to see everyone. I am going to ask that we're going to use the chat bar. So go ahead and if you haven't already said hi, check in, make sure it's working. So I'll ask for feedback and I will be checking in with that to make this as interactive as we can in this new normal of all Zoom all the time. So welcome. As you all know, the topic that I offered to talk about today is the first person to regulate is yourself, awareness and skill building for mental health professionals. There we go. And just to start off by defining what we're thinking about today, have you ever had that moment in a session where you've just flipped your lid, right? Where you freeze, or you think, I don't know what's happening here, or I don't know what to say next. And I see people nodding so that we have some shared experience here. And those are the moments I'm talking about. How do you learn what to do then? Because it's inevitable. They happen sometimes. And how do you learn how to prevent that from happening if that's available to you? I don't know what's happening here. Here we go. Okay, so I'd like to do, hold on, I'm having a little techno issue here. Okay, here we go. So let's take a little moment and I'm gonna take you to the next page where we're gonna do a shared body scan a few times during your presentation. So do a little self-check-in. You're gonna scan your body, your physical body, scan your thinking or your cognitive self, and scan your emotional state. And I'm gonna go to the next page so you can see a little scale I've created. So the body scan, rating yourself as 0, and you can, I'm not collecting these, so you can just jot them down. Rate 0 is I'm fine, I have no issues right now, I'm calm, I'm in zen, I'm in a state of joy or bliss. And 10 is the worst way you've ever felt in your body, that you can barely sit in this chair today and you want to get out of this Zoom right now. And anywhere in between. Your mind or thinking scan is 0 is your clear, calm, organized, rational, and engaged. And a 10 would be, I can't think while my prefrontal cortex is offline or my lid is flipped. On your emotional scan, are you happy, blissful, joyful? And a 10 would be a storm of affect. Prefrontal cortex is offline, you're in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So just doing a little body scan, a little mind scan, a little spirit scan right now, checking in where you are, and just noting that, because we're going to track this over time as we practice some of these things. Okay. So what is it like for you personally when you flip your lid? And if you want to pop that in the chat, this is a little page from this book, if you're not familiar with it, Holden Pot by Chandra Ghosh Ippen, one of the developers of CPP. This is a children's book, and I can share that, and Paula can share that afterward. I'm trying to see my chat here. What's it like if when you flip your lid? What does that feel like? I'm just reading our chats. Embarrassing to yourself, yeah. Crying like I have no control, yeah. You have a short temper, you feel scary. Your stomach is in knots, your heart rate's increased, right? So we're naming emotional, we're naming physical dysregulation. Oh, here we go, can't read or write, right? So there's cognitive dysregulation. Okay. So how do you personally know when you flipped your lid? You guys are naming this, what happens in your body, what happens in your thinking, what happens to your emotions. And then the question is, do you think others can notice when you as a professional have that moment? Do you think they can notice that there's been a change in you? Yeah. Can others see? Yeah, everybody's just saying yes, 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 yes in the chat box that we've all got. So why should we know? Why should we know how we seem to others if we're flipping our lid? Why should we know? That's what we're going to explore today. What's the self-talk that goes on for you at that moment? Some people have already said, I feel terrible, I feel embarrassed, I feel ashamed. What's the self-talk? Do you have any of this? I don't know what to say, I don't know how to do this job, I'm not good at this. Is there a shame spiral that goes on for you? Yeah, some nodding here. I'm completely overwhelmed. I should be able to control this. Yes, I suck at this. You messed up again. Oh, such mean voices in our heads, right? And if I said any of that to any of you, would it motivate you to get your prefrontal cortex back online? No, right? But we do it to ourselves all the time. So we're going to be thinking together today about ways of regulating as therapists. You know, when I did, it seems like a long time ago now, my psychoanalytic training at a wonderful institute where I learned so many wonderful things, but the sense of self-regulation, which was expected, wasn't really taught. You know, go do that behind the curtain in your own analysis. And I dutifully went to my analysis 4 days a week, and I talked about stuff, but I learned to hide my dysregulation storms much better, but I didn't learn to control them in the same way. It took, you know, another couple of decades for me to really understand myself deeply and learn what it takes. So we're going to think together a little bit about ways of regulating and mindful self-regulation and what that means for us as providers. Is anyone familiar with mindful self-regulation? You can chat in there if that's available to you. Yes, some people have heard of that. What have you heard about mindful self-regulation? Or what's your understanding? Kind of, yeah, I appreciate the honesty there. So ways of regulating, there's lots of different kinds of ways of regulating. One that we're going to think about today is mindful self-regulation. Checking in how you are doing, taking your psychological, your physical, your emotional, your spiritual temperature before you engage with clients. Does anyone have that current practice where you mindfully ground yourself, or maybe you even have rituals that you haven't defined that you do every time before you go sit with clients or with patients? Yeah, being present in the moment, present without judgment, noticing emotions and letting them go. Lovely. Accepting your thoughts and feelings. I usually do, my rituals are messed up since working from home. Yes, aren't they all? Yeah, so this stay-at-home order for all of us has really disrupted, hasn't it? How that goes for us. If you were used to having your coffee, getting you in your car, and maybe listening to your podcast as part of your grounding ritual towards heading for work, and now you're working from your bedroom, right? So now what do we do? How do we reorganize that? I try to notice when my body is stressed and do a short meditation between clients. That's a lovely example of ways of regulating. So what I'm advocating today is thinking about mindful self-regulation as a moment to pause, to breathe, to ground yourself. And there's many ways of thinking about grounding. Someone just wrote here to say a short prayer or to listen to 10 minutes of their audiobook, right? Maybe do a bit of yoga. Maybe if it's possible to take a short walk. Some of us see clients back to back and you're not able to leave and do that. One of the things that I try to do is wash my hands. I have a hand washing ritual in a good way, not in a OCD way. But all the major religions, interestingly, have the ritual of bathing, right? Of cleaning oneself in water to start over, of renewal. So I personally have adapted that as a way of rinsing off what has just been and starting over fresh and being newly available. So thinking together, stress balls, people talk about going for a walk and stretching in between sessions. So the important takeaway here is taking the time before the engagement of the client, right? To pause, to check in, to breathe, and seeing where am I if I scale myself on a dysregulation scale, like the one we played with, where am I before I do my grounding moment and where am I after? So what am I bringing to the interaction? Turn the music up. I was like, there's no music. People turn the music up and have a dance party, take some deep breaths, lovely. So let's try this one together, shall we? Place one hand on your chest and one other hand on your belly. Both feet on the ground. It's okay to sit up straight. It's okay to sit reclined. We just finished with a holiday where we like to sit reclined. I'm all about reclining. Take a deep breath in and slowly exhale. Take another deep breath in. Now control the exhale, lengthening it out. Do that 2 more times. And 1 more time, at your own pace. Now do a little scale for me again. Check in with your scaling that we started with today and see if anything changed. Maybe you came in a very nice, relaxed state and you don't need much to change. But maybe you came in a little jangled, rushing from thing to thing. Let's see where you are. Noticing any differences, no judgment one way or the other. Just observation, right? Someone mentioned that in the chat. No judgment about anything. I'm looking at the chats. People's computers are crashing, so they're having a little trouble staying connected. Okay. So now that you've started out in this nice focused state, this calm state, I'd like to walk you back to a troubling time. Can you think about one of those times where we started, where I had a lot of affirmations from you all around, gosh, what's happening here in the moment with my client? This feels terrible. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. My alarm system is going up. My amygdala is getting activated. I'm starting to lose my connection with my prefrontal cortex. To go back to that moment and feel what that felt like in your body at this moment. And you might feel your heartbeat increasing by comparison after just taking a deep breath. You might feel your palms feeling clammy. So physiological responses, you might start having the racing thoughts and the negative self-talk. And then let's pause. Doesn't feel good. It's a yucky feeling. Now you may have had a number of different strategies, or you may have had no strategies that were successful at that time. I'm going to offer one right now, aside from breathing, which you always have, and we'll talk more about, is to think about a person in your life who was particularly there for you, who supported you, who understood you, who loved you in an instant, in a moment, at a time, a long term, that you felt very supported, very understood, and very felt with. And allow those feelings to wash over you in this moment. Now, what did you notice? Did anything change? Did anything change from the distress that I intentionally had you go back to what came up? She felt warmth. People felt a sense of relief, a reminder that I'm safe. How powerful, right? How I felt emotional. Yes, calm and safe. Thank you for sharing that. How lovely. Grounded. Beautiful. Shoulders relax and I feel calmer. Isn't it amazing how we don't have to be with those who've given us those experiences to conjure them up and have a full body, emotional, spiritual experience of that moment, right? You know, my colleague Alicia Lieberman calls these our angel moments, right? Angels in the nursery, some of you are familiar with that, that context, but they're available for all of us all the time. It doesn't have to be a long-standing relationship. It could be when Paula was here 2 summers ago, I think, we went to the botanical garden and we had a really lovely afternoon connecting and reconnecting. And it's one of just the warm memories I have of her. I can call on that time together, right? When I need to be lifted up and feel better about myself. I feel the same way. Yeah, so you have that, what I call relational imagery, that's available to you. Right? It doesn't actually even have to be a person. Maybe you have a beloved pet or had a beloved pet in your life, or a beloved teacher or preschool teacher or Hebrew school teacher. Somebody was available to you at a time in your life that was particularly meaningful. That's there for you. Thinking about that. Great. I think my computer's a little stuck here. Here we go. So I'm advocating, before you see your clients, to pause, to ground yourself, to clear what came before them, before you step into whatever they're bringing. So this pre-context self-calming, doing a little scan, having some breath work, maybe having a little ritual, but being intentional about the planning that we do. Patricia Van Horn was one of my teachers and colleagues and friends. Some of you knew her, and she had a saying when she trained us called "strike while the iron is cold." Do any of you remember that? Yeah. right? So, and what Patricia meant by that in clinical work is, don't try to intervene when people's lids are flipped, right? Whether they're children or adults. You intervene when your prefrontal cortex, in case you don't know my hand signals, this is the Dan Siegel model of the mind, right? So here's a flipped lid and here's an engaged, intact prefrontal cortex in the model of the mind. And Patricia said, why would you try to intervene here? We always intervene when things aren't in a state of distress and dysregulation. So this applies to us, right? We're human beings also. You only get a muscle by practicing it when you don't need it in an emergency, right? If you go to use these tools and you haven't practiced them, you probably won't have much of a benefit in them. You might have a little bit, thank goodness, but you got to practice it when the iron is cold. So I'm advocating that there's lots of ways to cultivate a regulated state, but not all are available to us in that moment of sitting with a client. If you're a runner, and I've worked with folks who are runners and they say, oh, I love to go run after work. Well, what do you do in the moment? I'm sitting with Paula, she's my client, and something happens that I don't know how to handle. I can't get up and run out the door. I mean, I could, I don't think I'd see her again. So some of these are not adaptive to the work that we do, right? So they're not available to us. So we have to find things. Keep the running if that's what works for you. Keep the yoga. You're not going to drop down to the floor and start doing some poses, I hope. Right. Next week, we're going to come back. I'm going to come back and talk about supervision. We'll talk about why you shouldn't do that next week. So let's think about some of the things that are available to us, some of the other things. So I've came up with some what I call pillars of regulation for professionals. And technical. You'd think I didn't do this every day, and believe it or not, I do. Here we go. Pillars of regulation for professionals. I would actually say they're regulation pillars for humans, but I'm really adding this lens of being psychotherapist. So sleeping, I'm not going to give you a course in CBTI, but all of the wonderful tenets from cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia apply to us. Sleep hygiene, making sure you sleep when you're tired, get enough sleep, eat well, eat appropriately, take care of your body. We're often in the position of helping our clients become regulated, but we come tired and hungry to sessions, right? Grabbing things that we shouldn't. Meditation and or prayer is a grounding practice, but it doesn't work on the fly. It works cumulatively, right? It works when you attend to it. Moving, exercise, some kind of movement. Doesn't have to be something fancy, could be walking. That's all. I don't know what's happening in Israel. If you're allowed to walk, we're allowed to walk here, but within, you're not allowed to gather. You're not allowed to gather. Connecting, having relationships. What's the co-regulation piece? That we help each other by being connected. I see Paula's light and honor it, and she sees my light. We're connecting. Having work that's meaningful and valuable, caring about and believing in the work that you do, and creating something. Right? We are inherently creative entities. We create ideas, we cook, we create humans, right? Growing something, maybe you're gardening. So these pillars, so maybe thinking together about, well, what are the things that I'm doing well, and what are some areas for growth? Yeah, sleep, people are saying sleep, what's that? Yes. Well, so that would be an area for growth, right? That would be one that we could think together and target together. So learning to self-regulate as a professional. Before, during, after the session, I'm going to argue that we all learned or didn't learn to regulate via co-regulation or not via co-regulation from our families of origin. And families have different styles of regulation and different tolerance for levels of distress and levels of, I'm just going to call it regulation to avoid telling you too much about my family of origin. So what's, you all know this, that inherently as therapists, but I'm going to name an obvious thing, is that there's such a thing as emotional contagion, right? People are complaining about doing therapy in Zoom because they say, I can't feel my client in the same way. And I would say you actually can. It's a core capacity that you have not developed or are in the process of developing, so that you're strengthening that muscle that maybe you didn't use before as much or at all. And now you're learning that I can feel connected to my client and they to me in this way, but we attend somewhat differently. So we know that emotion has contagion, and the pandemic is a case in point, right? If you've gone out to the grocery And you might have felt very calm and safe and secure at home, and you go to the grocery and you can feel the emotional intensity upticking. Even if you're feeling regulated when you walk in, you feel the contagion of the panic in the place where you are. Yeah. So we want to notice and name that. And then and we as therapists already know, because you've learned this in your training, in your practice, how to sit with the emotional state of others and not allow it to take over in yourself, theoretically, right? We learn to differentiate my feeling state from your feeling state. And how do we do that? Well, we do that in a number of different ways. One of the ways is you can physically ground, put your feet on the floor, hold the chair, right? You can do some little mindfulness check-ins. Boundaries, exactly. Someone said boundaries. Well, it's interesting. I've given talks on boundaries and I get a fair amount of pushback because different silos of psychotherapy have different ideas about boundaries. I was taught boundaries are a really big deal in psychotherapy. It doesn't mean that people think about it differently or wrong. There's lots of different ways to be helpful, right, in psychotherapy. But how do we do that? I would say one of the other ways to help differentiate yourself from others is through supervision, through consultation, reflection. And by that, I don't mean venting. I don't mean venting to your supervisor or venting to your peers. I think that has a different quality that does not feel regulated to me, right? So I'm going to offer that we can take it to supervision or to a peer who is regulated. But I'm also going to go back to the physicality of being regulated, that we start out as human beings. If you think about attachment is learning to co-regulate our own bodies. So let's go back to a ground up, right? In our pillars. I started there for a reason. Let's start with how can we calm down our bodies? What does it feel like to be calm in our body? Can you notice a time that you felt calm? And then can you call on that when you're in a state of being dysregulated? Can you remember a calm time now? Can you all think of one? Okay, so visualize that for me. And what led to that calming time? Visualize that. Think about what was happening. Maybe you were exercising. Maybe you were dancing with friends. Maybe you were relaxing with your family or by yourself on a beach. Think about the physicality. What was happening in the physical world for you? Vacation. Get specific with vacation. What about the vacation do you think was helping in your physical senses? Maybe it was the smells. Right? Maybe it was the sounds that were different, the sights that were different. Now that you're all in the safety and comfort, now that you've all visualized that, go ahead and scale yourself again, please. Going back to that scale, when you're in this safety zone, this beautiful place of how it felt to be calm and regulated, and give yourself a scale. Great. And what are you noticing? What are you noticing in your scaling? Is that, and again, judgment-free zone. I'm just curious. Any changes when we're scaling from the beginning, slowly going down? So so even if they all went down. So I'm advocating that we need to have some kind of a measurement for yourself, even in a very informal way. I just made that one up over the weekend for you, in order to self-check. Because if I say to Gal, oh, I'm doing okay, well, what kind of okay is that? Right? Is that an okay that's a 5 out of 10, or is that an okay that's a 2 out of 10? I think if she was my therapist, she'd really be hoping to help me get to a 2 out of 10, or if she was my supervisor. But maybe I'm an anxiously temperamented therapist who I don't generally feel different than a 5. 5 is kind of the lowest I go, right? So we want to be thinking about that. All scales are going down. Lovely. Okay. So I'd like you all to think with me a little bit about breath work. As Paula mentioned, I'm also a registered yoga teacher, and I teach Pilates, and I teach meditation, and I teach breath work. And this is something I'm very interested in from a standpoint of reflective practice. Because when we think about our own emotional state as therapists and how our capacity to reflect, not just on our client's experience, but on how it makes us feel And then to differentiate between the they of that experience and the my stuff of that experience is profoundly important. So breathwork basics. Many of us don't breathe very well. When I first learned about this, I didn't know how to breathe correctly. Breathing should be through your nose. It's designed for breath, not through your mouth, in this school of thought. So nasal breathing. Your mouth is closed, but your jaw is not locked, and your teeth are not clenched. So go ahead and practice that. Close your mouth softly. Don't clench your teeth. Relax the tongue from the roof of the mouth, and you're breathing through your nose. Now that may create a little distress or anxiety if you have a clogged nose or you're an obligate mouth breather. So if it causes any distress, just don't do the technique, just follow along. But we're gonna practice this together. So feet are on the floor and practice this a few different ways. The first technique is called one-to-one breathing, which by the way, some of these you could do when you're sitting with clients and they wouldn't necessarily know. Right, so this is an in the moment down regulation strategy. So inhale and one-to-one means the inhale matches the exhale. So just start breathing through your nose and don't make any changes and just start breathing, counting the inhale and counting the exhale. Don't force it one way or the other. If this causes any agitation, just release the technique. But you're breathing in and you're breathing out. You may find that instantly there starts to have a pause, a slight pause in between your inhale and exhale. That's okay and that's normal. Inhale, what if your inhale's taking 5 counts? The goal would be for the exhale to take 5 counts also. I find myself breathing shallow often or holding my breath slightly. Yes. I lock my jaw a lot. Yes. Those are common stress responses. When we are in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, we hold our breath. Doesn't make any sense, does it? But we do it. We're waiting for the next blow. We're waiting for the next thing to happen, right? So a good reminder when you notice that would be to take a little breath, not a giant breath, just a nice breath. So let's go ahead and practice one-to-one breath. So let's take a couple breath cycles here. Inhaling for the count of 5 or 6, exhaling to the count of 5 or 6. Through the nose. Okay, release the technique. You can add in the chat, how did that feel? It's okay if it felt terrible. It's just information. There's no value judgments about it. People are noticing that their jaws are always tight. Yeah, that's a clenching response, right? Under here, there's a lot of tension. This is a really big muscle here. Relaxing, very relaxing. Just doing the one-to-one. I start to feel tired. That's important information, right? You might just be feeling relaxed. Relaxation and tired. Relaxing. I tend to pause between inhaling and exhaling. Sleepy but calm. Erin says her jaw is always tight. Ow, that sounds painful. The shoulders are less tense and I quit biting my lips. Oh, these are all such good things. Okay, so now we're going to work on 1 to 2 breathing, which I'm just making up numbers. The inhale is 5. The exhale, technically we're gonna go to 10. I can't do that yet, and I practice this all the time. It takes practice to do this. Let's remember that your rib cage, where you breathe from, is a cylinder. You don't just breathe here in the front. You don't want to keep our breath up here in the chest. You want to have your breath all the way down in your belly, dropping to your pelvic floor, in your side body, in your ribs, and in your back body. Your lungs actually live in the back of your body. So see if you can breathe into your lungs as we do this without creating tension or stress. So someone's noticing that their chest started to feel a little tighter and that she feels easier to breathe lying down. If it feels distressing, just let the technique go and practice it. She's noticing it feels better when she's lying down. Sometimes our bodies react to this change by clenching up, right? So we're gonna go for a 1 to 2. So we'll do 5 or 6 on the inhale, and let's just see what you can get. on the exhale. No prizes awarded. So just do the best that you can. Inhale. One more round. Release the technique. How'd you do? I'm reading your chats. And you all are doing great, by the way, playing, you know, doing this Zoom and using chat. So thanks for that. Hey, Harleen. How'd y'all do? Getting a little sleepy. Yeah. A couple times I felt like I was rushing to exhale. Yeah, it can feel like that because you're trying to get all those counts in, right? That's why it takes practice. But we're noticing that the whole body is relaxing. All we did, we haven't even done this for 5 minutes. More aware of other areas I'm keeping tense. Very nice, beautiful observation. I've always found if I can increase the exhales, it aids in relaxation. Well, you're onto something. There's actually science to support that. Then an increase in exhale actually has an effect on our vagus nerve. That's why we're doing it. So does chanting, so does singing, so does humming, right? It's really powerful. So the tension is lower. Yeah. The longer the exhales, it feels like I'm releasing more than just stale air. I struggle with the counting. Yeah, I agree. I can get a little worried about the counting. Sometimes I use my fingers so that it's not in my head so much. Lovely. So if y'all don't mind, if you're in a place where you can stand up, let's do it standing up and see if that changes anything. We'll just do one round. I know this changes your picture there. I'll just change that. And we'll just do one round. So same thing, 1 to 2 breathing. Let's inhale. Okay, now just shake that off. And we're gonna do it bent over. So just hinge at the waist. You can put your hands on your chair or on your thighs, but we're just gonna bend over. By doing this, we're disconnecting this tension that we tend to hold in our rectus and our front belly muscles, and we're allowing room for our lungs to expand. So let's see what happens in this position. And release the technique. How was that? Did one have more of an impact or feel very different? I'll let you get back. Yeah. Is that why when you exercise and when you bend over, grab your knees? Probably so you get more air in your lungs, like, intuitively. I feel like I can breathe deeper bent over. Liz, I can too. You actually can, because you're relaxing the front muscles. That because we're upright hominids, right? We're animals who stand upright. We use this front core to hold us up, and it's pulling in. And for many of us women, we were really also trained to over-engage those muscles, to suck it in. If you're old like me, you were told to really suck it in before there were stretch in jeans, right? So we really practice that. And by bending over, you have to let that go. Yeah, someone said when I have my asthma attacks, I lean on the table, I need that stretch. Wonderful. So the other thing to practice that you can practice in working on breath work is lateral bends or side bends. You could do it in your chair, right? You could do it on the floor, you could do it standing, but lateral bends is stretching and opening the side to open up the breath, right? And we're looking for mindful movement here, not discharge. I'm not trying to dump out that old Freudian catharsis. That's not what we're doing here. We're looking for mindful connection to what's happening in our respiratory system and noticing that there is a cascade of relaxation. And I'm, you know, we only have an hour, so I can't talk to you about the science behind this, but it's not anecdotal. There is hard science behind this, which is really lovely. So encouraging us to stay connected to our body and to move mindfully. All of this is great, right? All of this is great. And then how do you get to do it? Because you all know this as therapists. we can talk about wanting to change a habit. Changing habits is hard, right? It's hard to do that. If you want to change a habit, the best way to do it, the most effective way, according to the research, is short moments many times. So doing this 15, 20 seconds, 5 times a day, whenever you think about it. If you have 8 clients, maybe you can do a little breath work, just one round in between each client. And then, but I would want to, for me, I'm a big one on scaling. I'd want to scale in the morning and then scale in the evening the day I didn't do it. And then I'd want to scale in the morning and then try the technique all day and then scale in the evening and start to look at the data points and see how I feel. So it's more than just my impressions. Does that make sense? Yeah. So we want, in order, was there a question? All of a sudden I'm hearing sound, Paula. I think we were all muted. I think of it this way, you guys. If I wanted to, can anyone here do a handstand? I bet there's lots of people here who can do it. Sometimes I say this in my learning sessions. Anyone here? And sometimes there's one person who can do it. A handstand, most of us probably have the capacity to do it, but we don't know how to do it. You haven't built the muscles yet. You don't know the techniques. Yep, Heather can do it. Very good. It's a goal, right? So it's a goal. So for Jennifer, who has a goal of doing it, you know that there's steps towards that goal. In yoga or Pilates, if we're teaching handstand, there's very specific things that I'm going to do to strengthen specific body parts and warm you up in certain ways. Even in one yoga session, if that's my apex pose, I'm going to be doing things to build towards that. Same with this goal of regulation in session. Regulation in session, you have to build, if that's the goal, you're going to have to take steps to build that muscle, right? To build that strength over time and to improve that. Make sense? Okay. So one of the things that I'm going to argue that you want to practice and use to support your practice is supervision and consultation. I'm sure you all are very familiar with the difference between the two. Your supervisor may have the responsibility of being both your reflective supervisor, of course, and your administrative supervisor. And then there's that overarching clinical supervision, which may or may not be reflective. Consultation, I have a different relationship with you. I'm the consultant to many people in my CPP trainer role, and I'm the supervisor to fewer people. I have more of a relationship with my supervisees. Right? I care about all of them, but we can go there, we can go a little deeper because we have more of an intimacy. So how do you use supervision? Are you coming prepared to reflect? Lots of us come to supervision prepared to reflect on the client. Are you coming prepared to reflect on you? Do you ask for help? How do you experience me? If Paula's my supervisor, I want to ask her, how do you experience me? And she's a reflective supervisor. She would say to me, how do you think people experience you? See, she's laughing. I knew she would say that. Am I asking the question in supervision, Paula, how do other people experience me? And how do my clients experience me? Because I have no doubt that all of us assume benevolent intentions. We're there to be helpers, to be helpful. That's not always how we're experienced by our clients. And that lives with us. Right? Clients bring their own story and mishigas to the table, but we bring ours also. You know, if you're circle of security trained, you know what this means, shark music, countertransference. We have our family of origin stuff that comes to the table. How I say what I say, how I am, right, is stuff that I'm bringing with me. That I can bring to supervision. Do you ask, what am I missing? Paula, what am I missing? What are my blind spots? I don't know what my blind spots are. I need help. I need reflection to notice what my blind spots are. How does this relate to being regulated? Many, many times I have had consultation or supervision with someone who is profoundly dysregulated in a session. And that's really what's going on in the session. That the client is having a reaction to the dysregulation storm of the clinician, of a very well-meaning, smart, talented clinician who is just discombobulated and thinks it's invisible, and it's not. So I'm saying this thing that we don't talk about in our training, which is we are transparent, right? We're humans too, we bring our troubles to the table. A lot of the work though is we have all these wonderful resources. Please don't do this all on your own. Please partner in a co-regulation partnership to get help with this. It's not possible, in my estimation, to get better at this alone. Part of it is your own work, and part of it you have to do with a well-regulated other. Okay. My argument is reflective practice does promote regulation. It takes time. It takes time. This is actually some of these items. These items are lifted from or borrowed from Don't Hit My Mommy. It's part of our CPP fidelity. And these are the questions that we ask. You know, when we write up a case in CPP, we have to use a template and we code certain things to maintain fidelity. And one of the things that we code is reflective practice. And inevitably, people tell me, lovely young clinicians tell me, oh, I have no problems with reflective practice. And then when we start doing the consultation, because they can reflect wonderfully on the client, where the reflection gets stalled is on self-reflection, because it's uncomfortable, it's painful, right? It makes me feel weird to say, I don't know, gal, but here she is, my reflective supervisor. Now I'm supposed to tell her my troubles and my blind spots and my yuck moments in therapy. I want her to think I'm fantastic. I don't want her to think I don't know what I'm doing, right? So how aware are you of your own emotional responses and your own shark music? In other words, what's the stuff that gets you going no matter who says it? Right? There's those kinds of clients with those certain issues, you know what I mean, right? That get you going. How aware of you are your own personal or cultural biases? That you can name them and put them out there. Say, gal, these are my personal biases. I know this about me. I need you to know it so we can look out for it together and think about it. How is your ability to consider multiple perspectives? Moms, dads, the whole family, the child's, other caregivers, the schools. How is your ability to recognize and regulate strong emotions prior to intervening? Can we give this one 5 stars? Prior to intervening. We never should intervene when we are dysregulated, no matter how well-intentioned, right? But it happens. Guilty, I've done it, right? I'm better at it because I watch out for it a lot. So, you know, Patricia and I used to joke around and say, if you feel an absolute urge to say something, duct tape your mouth. It's not the time, right? It's not the time. Sit on your hands, bite your lips, don't say it. Wait for another bus to come by, right? And how is your ability to use supervision or consultation to process your strong reactions, consider alternative perspectives, and to seek new knowledge and new skills when necessary? So just a moment of reflection there about that. And we're going to end up in a minute so we can leave time for questions. Here's more little icons. So what works? Here's a little review. Good habits. Regular commitments build up over time. You have to have these good habits. You have to have these pillars. I don't think that we can be successfully regulated, and we really want to be those people. We want to be the do-gooders in the world, right? We want to change the world that we live in to help people and ameliorate suffering, right? Somebody has a question. Is it ever my style to name that you're feeling dysregulated? Yeah, I might do that. It depends, right? It depends on the client. It depends on the situation. Yes, yeah. Sometimes I don't even say it. And I'll just breathe it. And then everybody goes in the room, right? So we're co-regulating in that way. What works? The next pillar is regulation seeking, not experience dumping. You know what I mean, right? Yeah. Ground up regulation. So the physical body first. You have to attend to your physical body. Mindful self-regulation with check-ins, grounding check-ins, breath work, meditation, movement, and relationships. Please do this in relationships. Have reflective supervision, have consultation, seek competency building experiences. What is experience dumping? I'm using that as, venting. When you go to somebody and I just, it has a charge and it's not fostering my regulation. It's actually getting the person I'm saying it to freak out with me. Good, I'm glad you got it. And I think we're just in time to pause for questions. Does that sound right? Aha moments. Mindful self-regulation is MSR.
Lili, do you want to moderate your own questions?
Sure.
Okay.
You guys want to put them in the chat?
I guess so. Yeah, we have a couple hundred people here, so I think the chat will work better.
Let's do that.
Questions, comments, everybody. This is your chance.
There was already one question. I saw it if you were looking up. Paula, can you see it?
What is experience dumping?
Yes.
Answered that one.
You answered that one. And
Yeah.
also MSR, yeah.
MSR is mindful self-regulation.
Right.
And that's the before the contact with the client, checking in, scaling, grounding, recentering. So you're going in your calmest, most regulated place. Can you forward the PowerPoint? Sure. How about if I send it to Paula and Paula can disseminate? Is that okay?
To Gal, yeah. Gal does it with everybody who's registered.
Sorry, Gal. Right. Love the tips. You're so welcome. Good. Yeah, that experience dumping. I have changed my circle over the years around that very intentionally, because I noticed that I would do it too. Where we would kind of go from hard sessions to run to Paula's office and say, oh my gosh, and all this charge, and she might get activated with, she wouldn't, she's very calm. She might get activated with me, and then we'd both be up here instead of both of us being down here. Yeah. I feel like the challenge is to switching so many hats throughout the day. I completely agree with you. I think this quarantine has added that. I do supervision, I do teaching, I do yoga teaching, Pilates teaching, and I do consultation and training. And I felt that before. We went to this. Hi, Deborah Harris. Thank you. Oh, you're so welcome. Yeah. These tips also help for those of us who are working from home and homeschooling. I think they work for all of us. To me, they're human tips. Right, that I'm just adding the lens of, as a practitioner, I think I'm going to advocate that we need to be mindful before we move into every session. Yeah. Okay, what else is there? There's another question here. I miss my commute too. Those commutes, right? Oh, what a good question. Harleen says, did you find that it was less difficult to dysregulate once it's an intentional practice? I did. And for me, this has been, I don't want to tell you how old I am, really long time practice. I started a formal meditation practice when I was 25 years old. I was training, doing my first analytic training, and I would get very dysregulated. And I kept asking my older, more experienced, seasoned colleagues, like, how do you do this? And a few of them happened to be longtime meditators and taught me how to meditate. So I've had, thank goodness, that practice to ground me. And I've done personally several different kinds of meditation over the years. And I recently trained in transcendental meditation just because I'm a meditation junkie. So I advocate all kinds of meditation, any kind. People say I can't meditate. You can. If you need help meditating, reach out to me directly. I can set up a little Zoom and I'll give you a little coaching on how to get started with meditating. It can be really hard work. Yeah. Yes, and these tips are a great reminder to be mindful when we don't have our normal routines. I agree. I didn't mention this. It's really out there in the zeitgeist right now, but having gratitude. And I don't want to engage in spiritual bypassing. I'm not an advocate of that at all, which is to say everything's fabulous when people are suffering, and some of us are really suffering. And I don't think this experience is the same for all of us. And I want to name that. I'm coming from a place of privilege. I have my house. Thank God I have enough to eat. I can keep my body and my family safe, but not everyone is going through this in that same way. And I want to acknowledge that. But I can speak to the gratitude that I experience and still feel distressed by it. Yeah. Thanks for reminding me about self-reflection. It's easy to get out of the routine when you work on a multidisciplinary team and no longer in supervision. I completely agree with you. I've also I work primarily in child welfare, and that is not a reflective space. That is my politically correct way of telling you what's happening there. So those of you who also work in a medical setting, it's not necessarily a very reflective space. And we can change that. We can change that by modeling something different, right? By not getting sucked into that zeitgeist and that frantic, has to be done yesterday, everything's a calamity. Courtney says, I love that you mentioned spiritual bypass, difficult to recognize if and when we get into that. It's everywhere. It's all the little memes that we're getting, on Facebook these days. Working in schools is not so reflective either. I betcha. We can change that. We can change that. by modeling it and being in a different way. Any other questions or thoughts? Secondary trauma is tough. It really is. You know, I intentionally didn't, I love talking about secondary trauma, vicarious trauma. I intentionally left it out because Paula only gave me an hour. And that's a whole nother, that's a whole nother hour talk at least to think about that. But there's a fair amount of overlap here with what's effective. You know, my dear colleague, Joy Osofsky, has written extensively about secondary trauma in systems. And there is a fair amount of overlap with what we talked about today, although she doesn't get into the breath work the way I did. We should have a webinar on vicarious trauma and compassion fatigue. It's a great idea. It's a great idea. Would I share a template of regulation routine when working from home? Sure, I can give you mine. Not that it means anything to you, Roberta, but you know, I'm happy to share what I do. I will share this, you guys. It's about making appointments for yourself. It's about making appointments. So, you know, I walk every day. It's an appointment, right? I get up, I do my walk, I do whatever else I'm gonna do. Today I did an extra workout because I felt like I needed it. Right before I was with you guys, Paula was worried I wasn't gonna get on the call. I was doing my TM. I set the alarm, I go and I TM and I come. And I just knew it would be important for me to come to join you from a place of my most calm, right? If I'm gonna talk about that. Yeah. Oh, there's so many questions. In the midst of telehealth, thoughts about mindfulness and telepresence. I have a lot of thoughts about that, about staying grounded. I think it's really easy to do two things. One is to overwork, like to lean in, to talk too loud, to work too hard, to engage. And the other is it's easy to disconnect, to disassociate a little bit. And we can talk more about that. I'm still trying to have my personal space away from my workspace, so I have a getaway from the craziness. I know I have that. This little room. This is my workspace, and nobody comes in here under threat of injury. They just know. Nobody comes in here. My dogs are here, and when you didn't know that I have 3 dogs in here because when they're in here, we're working, and they are not quiet when they're in the rest of the house. But when they're in here, they are silent. Nice that I didn't add trauma. Nice not to think about it. There, like I said, there's a limit. There's a limit to what we can talk about in an hour. This is helping me realize I need to meditate more during work. Yeah, thank you for offering to help us with the meditation. I'm happy to, I'd be delighted to. I found more mindfulness in this transition. I have to sit, test the videos ahead of time, put music on by myself in my workrooms. Thanks for offering this. I'm delighted to offer this. Yes, we need to put ourselves back on the list of people who require our care. You have nothing to give if you don't take care of you. Right? You are not an automatically refilling cup. Your cup has to be filled up by you and your people. You have the responsibility to model that. To model that as this, that's why I ended with this candle, to be the light in the world. You have to come from a place of a full heart and a nurtured body and a nurtured spirit and a place of connection, not a place of desperation and frantic, right? That's resonating with people. We're getting lots of yeses. We need more of these trainings weekly, Paula Gall. We're getting a lot of endorsement here. Well, it's just so lovely to speak with all of you. This seems to really resonate for so many people. Isn't it interesting to have more time, air quotes, more time, and some of us feeling more dysregulation, right? We've added 3, 4, 5 different hats. If you're homeschooling and you're home, and now I don't know what it's like, what's happening in Israel, but we're some of our states are under mask order now. In New York State, your mask order. There's many retail establishments here in Chicago that are mask ordered. You can't go in if you're not masked. So it that takes a toll. That takes an emotional, spiritual, psychic toll on you, an energetic toll. Oh, somebody asked about books. I should write one, right? There's a book I really like about meditation called The Joy Within. I don't think it's in this library. I think it's in my other one. I'll find it and I'll link it to, oh, that's a great book. I got it right. I'll find it. And I actually know her. I'll find it and I'll link it to Paula and Gal so that they can send it to you. I mean, there's other ones like The Way of the Peaceful Warrior that I think are lovely beginning books if you're interested. Yes, I'm underpaid for all these hats. Me too. Me too. The joy within, the way of the peaceful warrior. Thank you.